Hello guys, my name is UNI105 and today I'm going to be answering the question, how can I achieve the perfect skin for my perfect pinup woman? I'm going to go ahead and answer that question with the way that I actually work, which is usually on flat tones and using line work, and building it up from there. I've already also created the layers that I actually work through. I normally start with a good solid line drawing, and then work my way up on all of these layers that I've created, starting of course with base tones. I've also dictated what it is that the colors that I need, which is for my skin tone, I'm only going to be using these three tones. The skin base, of course, to the left. The middle one is the shadows and gradient shadows, and I will get to that later. I've also dictated the light source. So we're going to go ahead and get started by actually dropping in the base tones on the skin. Since I work with line work, I actually have the benefit of being able to just use the magic glossing tool, making sure that, of course, sample all layers is actually selected. Since I'm actually not going to be painting in the lines layer. I'm going to go ahead and expand that selection by 1 pixel. Nonetheless, that selection is still not perfect, so what I'm going to do is actually zoom in and make sure that my selection is precisely the way that I want it. I'm a little finicky about this kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and finish selecting this stuff. I will concern myself with actually selecting the eyes and the lips and a couple of other areas later. That's actually what the details layer is for. Alright, seems like all the skin is now selected. Let's go ahead and drop foreground color right there. So I'm going to be using this layer as a selection constantly. So what that means is that I'm going to be pressing Command and clicking on the little thumbnail that's on the layers palette right here. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and jump into details. This is where I'm actually going to paint the eyes and lips and a couple of like other details, like a bit of a rosy tone over the nose and the cheeks. Alright, let's go ahead and paint those eyes before I actually jump in and paint the irises. See, we're a nice little green tone. Ooh, no. There we go, that's the one. Alright, let's go for the other eyeball. That is several other bases. Let's go ahead and paint the teeth now. Paint them white. Alright, got some good base colors right there. Alright, next thing I'm going to do is actually paint a bit of a rosy tone over the nose. I'm actually going to select that tone precisely from the skin tone that's already in there, but I'm just going to go ahead and intensify just a tad. Not too much though. Let's see what it looks like when we actually paint it on top of the skin. It's not enough. Let's go ahead and make it just a tad, a little bit more intense, that's all. And then make it a little bit more red. Now what I'm going to do is make a selection of the nose with the free lasso tool. And I'm going to go ahead and edit that selection in quick mask mode. Go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, just to make sure it's a little less sharp. And then on top of that, I'm also going to use a gradient tool not satisfied with that one. Let's go ahead and redo those gradients. That's looking a little better. Let's go ahead and do this one. This one as well. That looks a little better. Let's get it on quick mask mode. Tone's already selected there. Let's go ahead and cast a gradient. Now that's a little bit too sharp. I want it to be a little softer, so what I'm going to do is just delete a little bit of borders over here. You want to avoid harsh contrasts and avoid edges. That's kind of what I'm trying to soften here now. I like the way that the nose currently looks, but we need to soften it just a little bit. It looks a little better. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more of that with the brush tool. But I'm actually going to lower the opacity a little bit just to see what we can get out of that. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Looks a lot softer. Again, lower the opacity even more. Paint just a tad more and see what we can get out of it. Yep, I like that. Alright, with that same tone, I'm actually going to go in and paint the lips. For the lips, I'm actually going to use a sharper brush. Oh, the opacity is still down. Let's go ahead and increase it back to 100. Let's see the tone that we can get. Alright. That looks nice. Alright. Go ahead and zoom out and see how that looks. Looks interesting so far. The last thing I'm going to do is with that same tone, I'm going to go ahead and select again the base, the skin, and cast a gradient from the forehead down. This will help soften it just a tad. Just want her to make it look a little softer. I'm going to do the same with the neck down here. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and start actually painting in the shadows. Like I said before, I'm only going to be using 3 tones. So I'm going to go ahead and select this blue tone over the shadows. Now, the reason why I'm using that blue tone is because normally on skin, the highlights tend to look very gold, while the shadows tend to look a little bit on the colder side. So since I tend to work a lot with flat tone, I tend to just select my shadows with the polygonal, not the polygonal, the free lasso tool. Right. And you'll see what I'll do once that is all selected. Because like I said before, the problem with having too much of a contrast, if I were to paint her with only flat tones, her face would look a lot more angular, and that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid here. Let's see how that looks so far. Alright, it's laying in there. Remember, the shadows should of course describe the figure. Now, I think I may have forgotten to say that I'm actually obeying this light source that I drew up here. So of course the shadows are going to be on the contrary side of that. Alright. Let's go ahead and sharpen that nose just a little bit. That's looking a little better. Gonna go in with a brush now to refine. Well, actually, both brush and an eraser to go ahead and refine some of those shadows. Because, of course, it's a little bit on the rougher side. There are certain areas that you may have noticed I've actually left for later. The problem is that those areas are even softer, so I'm not going to lay in a shadow just yet. Because I'm actually going to take care of those shadows with a gradient tool. These areas are, for example, the forehead and the neck. Now, believe it or not, a lot of the tricks that I picked up on how to lay in shadows and highlights on skin, I actually picked it up by watching makeup artists. Normally, a makeup artist, the way that they work is that they try to pretty much enhance the features that are already there by evening the skin tone and evening shadows and highlights. It just makes the skin look a lot softer, and that's exactly what we're looking for when we're actually drawing a pinup. Ooh, this brush is definitely jaggedy. This is not good. Alright, that's looking a lot better. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and use a gradient tool to take care of the forehead. Since, like I've said before, the forehead, if I were to use a sharp tone, it'd be way too angular, and I don't want to do that with a forehead. Forehead is way too soft. So I'm going to go ahead and cast a shadow there, only with a gradient tool. I'm going to go ahead and select that. Using the free lasso tool, I'm going to go ahead and select the neck, because I'm going to do the same thing with the neck just now. Okay, I may have to zoom in and refine this a little bit. This looks a little weird. Okay, perfect. That's perfect. Alright, by pressing Command and Option at the same time and clicking on the base color layer, I'm actually crossing up selections, which means, oh, that's not it. It's Shift actually. Yeah, there it is. Command, Option, Shift. Alright. Bit of a gradient there. Perfect. Alright, so now next thing that I'm going to do is those harsh shadows that I put in there, they're still a little bit too angular. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and click Command and click over the base colors again just to create a selection, and then I'm going to go to Filter and cast a Gaussian blur on them just to blur them a tad and make them look a little softer. Now that's a good beginning, but it's not the only thing I can do. Now I actually have to start painting in a little bit more, and you know, it's going to be going back and forth between the smudge tool, the blurring tool, and a little bit of painting and erasing there. So you're going to see me do a couple of like things here. First thing is, I'm going to go ahead and start refining all around. Ooh, that's not the eraser brush that I want. I want the one that's got feather ends. Okay. Perfect. Sorry, I was just testing up a brush here. The only place that I want to have angular shadows are over the lips and a couple other places. Let me go ahead and select this lip and actually cast a gradient shadow because it looks too angular at the time. I'm going to have to expand my selection a little bit more. Let's see. That's almost like it. Let's go ahead and erase just a tad of that. No, too much. Let's go 20% opacity of that on that erasing. That's a lot better. Yep, looks a little bit more believable. Let's go ahead and refine that chin. Just doesn't look right just yet. That's odd. Let's try gradient tool and see what it does. Ooh, that's a little too much. Let's go ahead and undo that. Stick to the brush for now and see what we can accomplish here. Perfect. Okay, this is I think where we're gonna have to bring in the smudge tool. Now, smudge tool has too much strength. I'm gonna lower that to around that amount. There we go. That's a lot better. Now, it looks a little streaky right now, but I'm gonna go ahead and fix that in just a few minutes with the blur tool. Zoom out, make sure that's looking a lot better. Just a tad. Let's go ahead and erase some of those imperfections that the smudge tool created. Alright. couple more gradients around the nose just to soften that. See what it does. It seems to be working fine. Alright. Ooh, that casted too much of a shadow over the lips again. I guess we're going to have to erase that. 30% opacity on the eraser. There we go. Alright. I'm digging that. Let's go ahead and take care of her right eye. %, opacity, because we're actually going to start painting a little bit just to make sure that it looks a little feathered. I'm going to go ahead and deselect the eyeballs so I don't end up shitting them accidentally, as I want to do that individually later. Go ahead and create that selection again so I can cast a bit of a shadow over here. That's too strong. Let's go for 50% opacity. I like that a little better. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is select again the base colors and cast a very mild shadow right behind from where the light is. And I'm going to do that by taking down the opacity to 50% and casting a very mild shadow. Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. That looks good. Alright guys. The next layer that I'm going to work on is the gradient shadows. On that one, I'm merely going to use the black tone. And what I'm going to do is, right where the lights come in contact with the shadows, I'm going to intensify that contact. Which means what I'm going to do is make a selection out of the shadows I've already painted and use that selection to cast a gradient on that new gradient shadow layer. And I'm going to cast it from the direction that the light is coming from. Let's see what that looks like. See what happens? It just intensifies the shadows just a little bit. I'm going to cast a second one. There we go. What that does is it helps model the face a little better. Now the other thing that I'm going to do is from this direction, which is the complete opposite of where the lights are coming from. From that direction, I'm going to cast a rim light. And I'm going to do so by going back to the shadows layer and erasing a little bit of the shadows on the left side of her face, which is actually my right side. Alright, so I'm going to select a somewhat feathered brush, but I'm going to make it just a little less feathered. And I'm going to leave it in opacity 50%. This is to erase what's going on in there. And of course the rim light should describe the figure. And with this one, a little bit goes a long way, so don't go very crazy with it. Of course, the nose protrudes, so I'm going to go ahead and cast a rim light from that as well. Ooh, I didn't like that one. Let's go ahead and do this. Zoom out and see what that looks like. It doesn't describe the figure very well. Let's redo those. Yep, that's me undoing like crazy. That is a lot more believable. I'm going to stay with that one. Okay. Right on the gradient shadows, I'm actually going to take advantage that I already have that layer right there. And I'm going to intensify the shadows right over her left eyelid. Just a tad. It's a little too much. Let's lower the opacity. Let's see. Zoom out and see what that looks like. Looks really nice. Alright. So as you notice, now I'm going to jump into the next layer, which is the gradient lights layer. What I'm going to do is very simple. I'm going to go ahead and select the base color, which is actually pretty much all the skin, and I'm going to go ahead and deselect the shadows. That will only leave me with the areas of the skin that have not been affected by shadows yet. I'm going to intensify the light by actually casting a gradient in white, 50% opacity, from the direction that the light is coming from. And that's just going to intensify the light a little bit. It also brought out a little bit of her cheekbone. Now, at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some color correction. I like that the shadows are a little bit colder and the highlights are a little bit warmer, but they're not enough for me. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the lines and actually the highlights, which I'll get back to in a few minutes. Go over on top of that and create a new layer. God, I forget what these layers are called for. Let me see. An adjustment layer. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and create an adjustment layer right on top of it, and it's going to be curves. This graph, what it shows you is these lines over here represent your dark tones, and these lines over here represent your light tones. So what I'm going to do is drop the menu and go ahead and select blue. And on my dark tones, I'm going to intensify the blue. Whereas on my lower tones, on my lighter tones, I'm going to go ahead and decrease the blue. This will give her a little bit of a golden tone. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the drop-down menu again and select red. And I'm going to do the complete opposite. Intensify the red on the highlights for a warmer tone and decrease it on the shadows. That just overall gives her a warmer tone. Now going back to the highlights layer, this one's very simple. A little bit of white here and there. I'm not going to go very crazy. Like I said, too much modeling will make her face too angular. That's not what we're going for. So in this layer, I'm going to cast just a couple of lights. Nothing too crazy. I'm going to feather it just a little bit. That's too much. A little bit right here, on the lips, and of course, the eyes. Ooh, what's going on here? There you got it, guys. Smooth skin for a pinup lady. Thank you very much.